Welcome back, everybody, to the Spiritual Uplevel Podcast. I'm your host, Jeri Cristine, and today I am so excited to have my guest, Erika Shelton. I know her from Omaha, from the Manifest Omaha group. And Erika, you're my first guest from there, so I'm so excited to have you. It's always fun to have somebody from my home area. And you are such a unique blend of astrology, human design, gene keys, energy work. Am I missing anything?
I also do psychic medium stuff as well. But yeah, you pretty much covered it.
That is so cool. So thank you for being here, first of all.
Thank
But
you
I
for having
want you,
me.
absolutely. And I want you to begin by just sharing with our audience a little bit about who is Erika Shelton. How did you get started doing this? And, a little bit, that's a lot of things that you do. So how do you combine all of that together?
Yeah, so I would say that I got started in the spiritual community in general probably about 8 years ago. I have two daughters, and so I was freshly what is that word, postnatal, I guess, with my youngest daughter, and I was just like sorting through a lot of mental traps, a lot of like limiting beliefs that I had, and kind of just like I had viewed the world through this lens of struggle and doom and gloom, basically. And I kind of just came to a realization that I could not keep going that way any longer. And so it was almost like in a point of desperation, because before this point I was very like left brained and science minded, and so it was through desperation, I guess, that I started to seek out other forms of healing. And that led me to, I think my first love was astrology. I started to deeply dive into that and study that. And then when I kind of had reached my limit with that, I was looking towards like energy healing work and started getting Reiki sessions, which led to me getting my Reiki master certification. And I was always looking for a way to kind of blend my astrological knowledge with my Reiki practice, and it was always kind of awkward and it never really fit. So it was always almost like I was doing two separate services. And about 3-ish years ago, I discovered human design and gene keys at the same time, went down a whole rabbit hole with that. And it was like that missing key I needed to kind of blend the astrological knowledge in with the energy work and make it more holistic. And I feel like from that, just a lot more niched kind of realizations have come through, and now my services blend all of that together, but in a very directed way. My whole goal is to help people decondition, and a lot of that comes through like finding blockages and releasing them, as well as discovering more of who they truly are underneath any layers of conditioning.
Oh, wow. And that seems to be such I don't know if it's like a theme or like the whole point of existence is uncovering and discovering who we are underneath all of it. It's interesting that you mentioned your journey started after your second daughter was born, because that same thing happened for me.
Oh,
I
wow.
just was in like this, and my kids are adopted, but I had postpartum, like you wouldn't believe. I was in this deep depression and just like started searching for exactly that. Like, who am I really? Like, what's the point of all of this? Why am I leaving my kids to go to work at
Mm.
at a job that won't matter when I'm gone? Um, and so, yeah, it seems to be, I could talk about that forever. I heard
Same.
someone say, you're my perfect guest. I heard somebody say recently, it was actually another one of my guests, on episode 3, Ron Netger. He is an awakening guide, and he said, "Who are you truly? You are not what we think we are is stories that we've been told by other people, and we've accepted them and created this story of this is who Jeri is. But like even your name, I believe that we choose it before we come, but even our name was first given to us here by somebody else.
Yep.
And
Yep.
so that unraveling and uncovering, oh, that's so
Yes.
juicy.
There's this I think it's a tarot card or an oracle card message that has always really resonated with me, and so I call my program the Inner Gems program, and it's because of this card where it talks about like we all have like a unique gem within us that's unlike anyone else's in the entire world, but it's going to take a lot of digging and excavating and darkness, in order to get there and find it. And you're absolutely right. I think also a lot of us identify with our coping mechanisms. Like that's been my journey, kind of realizing how much of who I thought I was actually ways that I was coping with my external environment, and built a whole identity around that.
Can you give some examples of what you mean by that?
Yeah, actually, I think this one is a good one that applies to a lot of women, especially as well, maybe even women my age, where we kind of grow up trying to be the cool girl, or that whole phrase, like I'm not like other girls, and and we end up like fitting in a lot with men, and then we also get that like cattiness, I guess, from other women, and we always feel like we're in competition of them. So like I guess I always had this identity that I wasn't very feminine, and that I was more of like a tomboy or more masculine, or I couldn't like relate to the emotions of women. And over like especially the last like few years, it has really been a process of deconditioning that and getting back to my feminine energy, because a lot of that was just coping mechanisms to try to fit in or try to keep myself safe from volatile emotions, and just that kind of stuff. And in working with women especially, I've noticed how deep this issue runs. So
Oh, I can relate to that too, completely. I was the same. Just never felt very feminine. Didn't I always felt like it didn't serve me to be feminine. And
mm-hmm.
so therefore I'm gonna be strong and hard and like, type A, like business driver and all those things. And since this spiritual journey have also been deconditioning and releasing that and allowing the feminine and finding safety and comfort there.
Oh my goodness. I would also say too, a big part of this, like what you had said to kind of go on top of that, also like hyper independence, and how much having a feminine community and like sisterhood has been next level. I feel like a lot of women, we try to kind of deny this, but a lot of the times we really are programmed to be more service minded, and so it's really hard for us to kind of go into these things on our own. But when we have another woman like mirroring and empowering us, it's like, I don't know, it just feels like that's the tickets a lot of us need to go on this journey in the first place.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love that. Oh my gosh. So let's bring it back to some of the modalities that you do, because I know that, you mentioned you have your Reiki master, and I saw on your social media that you also teach astrology classes. So if you had to pick one of these, what's your favorite modality?
Oh my goodness. I guess when you said that, Gene Keys screams at me. I
I
feel like
love Gene Keys.
I love it. I feel like if you were to start with Gene Keys and you don't even get into any of the other modalities, like, I mean, you would still be missing something, but not a whole lot. Like, I feel like you could get the most bang for your buck, I guess, with the Gene Keys program.
Okay, so let's go to Gene Keys, because I love Gene Keys too. Whenever I use it as a tool in my coaching, my ladies retreats, we use it. So I'm going to have you explain what is Gene Keys, and then I'll add in my perspective.
Perfect. Okay, so for me, I guess what I feel it is I feel like Richard Rudd really understands all the concepts of human design, having studied under Ra. However, he has more of a poetic, kind of visionary and genetic science-based perspective on all 64 gates, which derived from the ancient I Ching, right? And so his book goes through each gate, he calls them a gene key, in a way that goes through 3 different frequencies: the shadow frequency, the gift frequency, and the Siddhic frequency. And it's a way for you to really understand these shadow patterns in either a repressed or reactive way within yourself and within your external environment. And what I love the most about it is that it's not shaming you for those shadows. It's showing you how those shadows are really gifts underneath, and how you can kind of contemplate these shadows and find the gifts within them.
Oh, that's beautiful how you said that. Um, so yes, I completely agree. The Gene Keys is so pivotal and so transformative. And you also mentioned human design and the I Ching, but the Gene Keys to me is it doesn't even matter if you completely believe what he's
Mhm.
talking about, that are basically the book, the concept is that we as humans are transmuting and change, our bodies are physically changing at the gene level in order to I'm going to use up level our energy along with the energy of the planet and the universe, really. And that is fascinating. I'm sure we could talk about that for a while. However, it doesn't even matter if you believe that our bodies are upgrading and changing. The 64 gene keys, if you just read through them or pick it up and whichever one the book opens to that day, read that one. They're so powerful. We each have all 64. However, based on your birthday, you have ones that are more specific to you, like your purpose in life, your struggle, um, I'm not even remembering what all they are, but every single one of them applies to all of us, and they're so beautiful, like you said. And you can see how the shadow shows up in your life or the people in your world. You
Yep.
can see the gift and you can aspire for the city, and it is I'm always so deeply moved that I feel like if everybody read that book, our world would be a different
Oh,
place.
I feel that to my core. And I really love that you brought up that you kind of use it to just like flip to a random one and how they all apply to all of us. So I am actually a reflector in human design. And so reading all 64, I guess, is what really like inspired me in so many different ways, because I can really relate to like the whole archetypal journey in general. And so to be able to see it from his lens is just more hopeful and more inspiring and uh more soft, open-hearted, right?
Yes, yes, completely. And yes, so I do. Sometimes if I'm struggling with an issue, I literally will just open the book or a number will come in my head and that's the one I read. And it's always speaking
Yep.
exactly to the point. And he says you can use it like that because it will do that. Um, You also talked about like how soft it is and how positive it is. And there's a couple things within the Gene Keys that I loved, talking about how our world is changing. For example, one I told you my children are adopted. And so our family dynamic is just a little bit different. We have, we believe that we adopted the whole entire family. And so we have super open adoptions and we're just all kind of one big crazy weird family. But one of the things I always heard about family, for example, is that the schools are trying to take away family. They're trying to end the family nucleus. And that can incite fear. But the way that he talks about it is we're going more towards love. And so, therefore, family won't mean the same thing because everybody will love each other. And like today we have our family, but we're behind closed doors. We don't even sit on our front porch and we don't know our neighbors anymore. And
Mhm.
he's saying that it will be more like community based, not going backwards, but how it used to be. We used to live in community and everyone raised the children. And that really resonated for me just from the fact that we have kind of that going on in my life right now with how open our adoptions are. And so there's a lot of different things that I discovered through that book that I'm like, oh, from this perspective, that sounds really scary. But from the Gene Keys perspective, I can see how beautiful that is.
Yes, yes. The hope for the future, because I do think that a lot of conditioning tells us it's just like an ego death. So like I said, if you kind of like construct your identity around a certain coping mechanism, but then it becomes a hindrance to you eventually. I feel like that's how the healing journey works. It's when you finally realize like, oh hey, this thing that has been working for me for all these years is now actually causing problems in my life because I'm reaching this next level, that I need to let this go. And it's an ego death, like over and over and over again, because you have to let this old identity go. And I feel like that's happening a lot at a collective level too. Like what you just said is a perfect example of that. We kind of have a collective identity around what does a family mean and what does community mean and what does, having a healthy diet mean. I mean, it goes on and on and on. And we collectively are also going through that same process where the next level is going to have us confront a lot of worn out identities and release them.
Yeah, and the whole book is about evolution. If we're not growing and evolving, we're dying. And we're not dying, we're growing and evolving as a human race and a planet. And so, yeah, it's what's the next evolution and opening to be comfortable and excited about that. So, Erica, how do you use that in your work with clients?
I feel like when you say that, do you mean like just kind of looking at the future or being more hopeful for the future?
Yeah, like like I know that's one of the tools that you work with a client who comes to you, and I know your passion is kind of uncovering their passion, right? And
Yes.
so, how do you use like the gene keys um, and we'll talk about human design as well, but how do you use the gene keys when you're working with somebody?
Yeah, so kind of like what you said about opening the book, like I feel like that's actually how it goes in my session. So I have kind of two different ways that people work with me. One way is like a session by session basis where when we get on the call, they kind of lead me, into what needs to be healed and brought up at that time. So that definitely usually does pull forward a gene key to go into and talk about and discover. However, also I have the other side of what I do, which is more structured, where we're actually going through your hologenetic profile in a more structured way, right? So then that's more like I'm telling you what to kind of work on and uncover and when. But I will also say that when it comes to the evolution of humanity on a collective basis, I really feel that it's important for every individual to discover their uniqueness in order for the collective environment to be healthy. So basically my concept with this is that when we are doing things because we think we should, because of how we were raised, because of how we're scared maybe to be perceived by our community, and we're kind of falling into these traps of like groupthink, and we are losing our individuality in our communities. In my opinion, I think that causes a lot of collective strife, and that it's like I feel like the collective mind or body or emotions is like an ecosystem, and every individual has its own very unique part to play in that ecosystem. So that's why I'm so focused on that, because it's like if you can find your unique parts, like your unique way of serving. And see, I think a lot of people also think it's like an egoic journey, but it's really not, because it's about finding your unique way to serve the collective, right? It's a journey of service, but you have to discover yourself first before you can serve of the highest good. And when we all do that, I really think the future is going to look amazing with that. And I think that's also the explanation for a lot of the things that we see going on in the world. It's all to have us stop looking externally for answers and instead go inward and find our own inner authority.
Oh, that's beautiful. And I agree. I feel like a lot of stuff is coming up for people to be addressed at this time. Like, maybe more than ever. Things are coming up because it needs to be addressed so that your inner light and your uniqueness can shine forward from a place of love and wholeness. So, oh, how beautiful. So, talk to us about human design. So, in human design, you, based on your birthday, have a certain design type and a chart. And so you're explain that, explain how that works.
Yeah. So yes, everybody has what they call a body graph, and your body graph is a combination of a bunch of different modalities. So we already kind of talked, it's based on your astrological information, the placement of your planets the moment you were born, as well as the placement of the planets around 44 days before you were born. And we can go into that more about the personality versus design side. That's what you will see. But yeah, it's essentially a combination of astrology, the I Ching that we talked about, the Kabbalah, and the chakra system. However, a lot of people who are already, like myself, actually, I was already familiar with the chakra system, and I'm like, there's 7 chakras. Like, what is the spleen? What, like, what are these other centers? And the concept is that around the same time as the discovery of Uranus, which was in the late 1700s, we mutated into 9-centered beings rather than 7-centered beings. So it's essentially just an outline of your centers in your body, how they are impacted by the position of the planets. And that means that they could either be something we call defined or undefined. You could have certain gates that are, creating channels or not, etc. There's a lot going on with human design, but yeah, essentially it's your unique way of functioning in the world.
Wow. And you mentioned that you are a reflector.
Yes.
And I know I'm a manifester.
Oh, wow.
Oh yeah. I think most people are manifestors, right? Or like high percentage of people are manifestors or
Actually, a high percentage of people are generators. Manifestors
okay.
are a little bit more rare.
Oh, okay. Okay. And reflectors are rare, right?
Reflectors are the rarest. There's only 1% of the population.
Wow. So can you explain those a little bit?
Yeah, yes, generators are the most common type, and that basically means that if you were to look at your body graph, you have your sacral defined. And then the reason why that's the most common type is because that's the life force energy of the world. And they have an aura that is like magnetic. It's always attracting things towards it. And then its job is to use its sacral to respond to those things rather than getting up in their head about it. Right. So it's really about how you kind of manage your battery. And so if you are saying yes to things that you should be saying no to because your body is telling you no, you're going to find yourself frustrated, as to where if you are living in alignment and you're responding to things that really light you up and fill you up, you're going to feel satisfied. And then we have manifesting generators as well, which means that they have the throat center along with that sacral energy. So they still use their sacral energy first, and then once they have reached clarity about their decision, they will also use their voice to inform those around them. And then we have manifestors who do not have that sacral energy, but they do have that throat energy. You're here to inform. So is that what your strategy? Yes.
You know what? So actually when you said it, I'm a manifesting generator.
Okay. Okay.
My son is a manifester. I have a
Okay.
son and then a daughter who's a generator.
Oh, perfect. Perfect. Yeah. So you'll probably notice with a pure manifester aura, they are very repelling because they're kind of always going through this creative process. So they really have to kind of like block the world out in order to, manifest something clearly and inform everyone else.
Yes. And he talks all the time. All the time. From the moment he wakes up till the moment he goes to
It's got to exercise that throat chakra. And then,
yeah.
so then
Yeah.
we also have projectors, and projectors do not have sacral authority, and they might have their throat defined, but it is not connected to any motor centers. And projectors have an aura that is penetrating. So the way that I kind of see it is like they have like a little tentacle that comes out of their aura and penetrates the auras of others around them. So they're like really good guides. They can kind of feel out that sacral energy in others and kind of help guide them towards alignment. And that's why they're actually the newest type. So along with that mutation that happened, they were then brought into the world. So before that, they did not exist, which is kind of interesting. So they're here to kind of help guide us towards that inner authority, actually. And then reflectors, lastly, is the rarest type. And what that basically means is, like, if all of you guys were to look at your body graph and you see definition, all this different definition that makes up all these different types, a reflector has none. So all of my centers are completely open. And that means that, actually, oddly enough, as much as I like to help other people find their inner authority, I am very much influenced by external factors as well as the transits. Because of that, I have what they call a Teflon aura. So I can kind of sample things that I want to, but I have to kind of, things have to kind of fly off of me. Otherwise, I would be way too conditioned to function, essentially. So a lot of
Wow.
my life is about sorting through that conditioning and living by transits. And so because of that, my strategy is to wait a lunar cycle. I live very much with cycles, with moon cycle. I mean, actually, that's probably what I'm most known for, is living with the moon cycles. And now I'm really getting deep into cycle syncing and stuff like that. So yeah, I hope that
Wow.
was a good explanation of all the
That
time.
is a very good explanation. So talk to me about cycles. What does
Yeah.
that mean, living by moon cycles?
Yeah, so this is one of my favorite stories, actually. So, uh about 7 years ago, I was maybe even 8 years ago, I started getting into living with the new moon and full moon. So basically, what I mean by that is, like, I had a group of girls. We would all get together every new moon and full moon, and every new moon and full moon, we would pull like a little card spread for ourselves and ask ourselves some contemplative questions. And then every new moon, we would set our intentions for the month ahead. And then every full moon, we would release anything that was kind of getting in the way of our intentions. And so, like, I was like, that's probably actually the most routine I had ever been about anything in my life up until that point, was doing this. And it was like, it just changed my whole life, honestly. Like, I have this story I tell where I was like in a not so great, healthy, not so healthy relationship. And I was trying to figure out how to get out of it. I was trying to figure out how to leave it. And I was just like kind of hitting my head against the wall all the time. And so it was a full moon, and I wrote his name down and I burned it along with my other things that I wanted to release. And that very same night, he left. Like, he just took care of the problem. And I don't know.
Um,
So when I found out that I was a reflector, and the reflector strategy is to wait a lunar cycle and to pay attention to the transits and stuff like that, I was like, man, I already got this down. Like, I've been doing this for years and I swear by it. Like, it really works. So yeah, and now it's a little bit more deep. Actually, if anybody listening to this goes to my website, I have a free downloadable that gives you exactly what I do at each moon cycle and how I kind of use that in my life. So I would say it works for manifesting, for releasing and healing, for self-exploration as well, because I get very specific about, where is the moon astrologically and what's going on in the transits right now. And then it really helps me, like, bring to the surface what needs to be released or what needs to be manifested.
wow. I love that. I'm going to have to check out that download. And I will have you share all of your social and website at the end so that our audience can reach you. So, with astrology, because you're talking about where is the moon and the transits and all of that, um, you've been doing astrology for quite some time. And like we talked about, you teach a level 1 class. Is a level 1 class very approachable for people like myself who've never studied astrology?
Yes, I would say so. What really inspired me to create that class, actually, is that I'd noticed that a lot of people who were just starting out were getting really intimidated by the wheel, right? So, like, if you look at the astrological wheel with all of its aspects and stuff, people are like, whoa. And so they kind of resort back to looking at it in more like of a list form. So they'll be like, oh, my Venus is in Libra, and then they'll try to kind of figure out what that means. But I feel like it's almost like learning the wrong way, if that makes sense. Not that there's any wrong way to learn, but just that when you kind of like get more comfortable doing it that way, and you'll never really get comfortable seeing it as a holistic wheel. And so my goal was, like, how do I start people from the very beginning looking at the wheel, like not avoiding the wheel, because I feel like when you can kind of get the basics down with that, you'll be able to just like see it in a more almost like intuitive, communicative way. Instead of it like telling you what you are, you can kind of like, oh, and like kind of play with it. It's more interactive.
Very cool. I've always been interested in astrology, but for whatever reason, I feel intimidated by it. And I think it's like you said, it's the wheel. It's like, what are all these trines and all, like, oh my gosh, there's so many things on here to learn, but it sounds much more approachable the
I
way that.
hope so. I hope so. I think from the feedback I've received from people who have taken it, they said that it really did help them like click a lot of things into place that just almost takes your learning journey from that point on, makes everything much easier.
That's awesome. So explain to me astrology a little bit. Obviously I think everybody knows like whatever their sign is, right? And we're used to like the daily horoscopes or whatever's going on a little bit. But I've also always heard that like presidents have an astrologist that they,
Mm.
you know, get guidance from all the time. I know a lot of people, really successful people, that I've heard do that. So why
Yeah.
is that? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, so I'll kind of give my rundown on how I see astrology. So, for all of human history, we have been like asking ourselves, like, why are we here? And what does it all mean? And these questions. Well, back before we had all of the things that we have now to look straight forward at, we didn't have a lot going on. And we spent a lot of time looking up at the sky, looking at the stars, noticing certain patterns that were going on in in the stars, and that was really sacred to humans back then. And then they started to kind of apply those patterns to patterns that were also playing out down here on earth, and they started to notice these connections, and that is kind of where astrology was born. And then from that point on, I mean, for thousands and thousands of years, it has almost been a pattern tracking tool, right? So, like, even if you don't believe that the stars have any impact on what's going on down here, you have to at least respect the fact that this was science before science was invented. And it was a way of really kind of studying the patterns of humans and humanity and personality traits and stuff like that. And so, it has obviously evolved so much over the years. I mean, certain signs have different rulers as planets were getting discovered, and that kind of changed the vibe of things. I mean, even human design and gene keys is a great example of how it's still evolving, and it's still, people are looking at it from their own different perspectives. People are receiving almost different downloads from the universe. And so the way I see it is more of like a quantum entanglement, that everything in the universe is connected in a very weird, hard to explain kind of way. And so that's how I feel that the planets do have an effect on us. And when you talk about like very successful people using an astrologer, it is because of the impact of planets in transit or planets in progressions, which is another thing, another tool that astrologers will use to kind of also show the evolutionary journey of an individual person in comparison to the evolutionary journey of the universe. And so it's like, for instance, like, oh, if this planet is transiting your 10th house, that might be a good time for public recognition, or to make a move in your career, or to discover more about your legacy or your reputation. And so that's how it's been used as a tool to kind of like work with the energy rather than always working against it.
Wow. And I find it fascinating that this was, like you said, this was science and this was common knowledge and what was just used by everyone. And then it it tried to be hushed, I think,
Mm-hmm.
and taken away from the people. Maybe because we'd be more powerful with it, like we'd be more in sync with everything. We wouldn't be so easily controlled, but now it's all coming back. you mentioned that you're also a psychic medium. With all of this intuitiveness, do you see that happening right now, that like more and more people are, I don't know, waking up and this, becoming more intuitive, becoming more connected with the
Yes.
cycles and things like that? Yeah. So your answer is yes. So why do you believe that is, and what do you believe that means for the future?
Yeah, so I think it goes back to kind of what I said before about this external versus internal authority. I think that if you go back 50 years ago and you tried to live in such a way where you really respected external authority. So what I mean by that is, like, for instance, the American dream is a good example of that. It's like, if you do A, B, and C, you will be happy, you will live a good life, you'll be successful, and you believed in that, so, and that's also like an age of Pisces kind of thing, right? It's having something outside of you to believe in, essentially. But you can see how that can go into shadow versions of that, of like deception and delusion and all of those
It
things.
did.
It did, right. And so
It
I feel like a lot of people are waking up from uncovering that untruth of that, that, oh, well, I did go to college and wait to start a family, and I did follow all of these rules, essentially, that they told me I needed to follow, and they're still struggling. They're still finding it hard to buy a house, or they're still unfulfilled, or they're working a job that wasn't really meant for them, but they did it because their mom told them to, etc., on and on and on. And I feel like when there's still that deep pit of like purposelessness, or almost like feeling lost, like out of sync with everything, like kind of like with me, you tend to get desperate and let go of some of those things and go, what's another way, like, what's another way of going about life? Like, I don't think I can live the rest of my life feeling this way. So I'm going to seek out. And also, I feel like the fact that the internet has come about and we're more interconnected than ever, we have these resources to learn things. I mean, I think about, had the internet have never been discovered, like Erika living in North Platte, Nebraska, I could only imagine the kind of conditioning, like the kind of person
Yeah.
I would be today if I didn't have these resources and these connections. I mean, I'm friends with people all over the world. So it's like, it's just interesting how that has also helped, and I think aided us to kind of let go of some of these traps that keep our mind shut down to the possibility, you know?
Oh yeah, possibility. Yeah, the internet is another thing that like us becoming more worldly because of being able to be so connected. That's another thing that can be fear-based, or it can be exciting and beautiful that the world is becoming more connected, and eventually that should lead to just more fairness and more people waking up to that, like you said, this isn't working anymore, this isn't right, what's another way that we can do it?
Ooh, when you said that, it also kind of made me think, like, when I say about that, like, uniqueness, creating a healthy ecosystem, it also reminds me of that analogy of, like, you can't teach a fish to climb a tree. Like, the more that we open up to that differentiation between all of us, the more we're going to be able to create collective systems, governments, communities, like all of those things to kind of align with that principle. So instead of making masses of people abide by these same rules, or that every kid should go to school in the same way and everybody should go through working and motherhood, or the list goes on in the same way, is going to finally disintegrate, and people will stop feeling like they don't fit into their collective communities. But it takes a lot of bravery. Like, we're in a weird spot right now where it takes a lot of bravery to break out of those collective circles. And honestly, I feel like people are starting their own and creating examples of that.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, people are doing it every day. I love seeing, like, I TikTok is my Netflix. And I saw a video of these women that are all probably in their 80s and 90s with the most eccentric outfits, and they're like, you can dress however you want at any age, and I was like, oh, I'm gonna go put on my great big golden earrings.
I love it. I love TikTok for that same reason. I feel like just there's so much uniqueness and authenticity on that app.
Yes.
I'm
Yeah.
almost addicted to it for sure.
I know, right? Yeah, but like you said, people, the more and more that we stand in our uniqueness, the world's going to be a beautiful place. I think along the way, we do have to watch the trap, though, and I think you talked about this in the Gene Keys. We be your unique self. However, don't be unique because somebody else is being unique.
Mm, yep.
Don't follow that pattern because then you're just being the same again,
Yep. Well,
Just,
and that's kind of why it's like a dark journey, honestly, because it's like I truly believe you won't find that real unique to you uniqueness until you dig through a lot of stuff that you probably have been trying to avoid, right? Because you're trying to avoid that. That's why you're trying to replicate someone else because you're avoiding that journey.
yes. Oh, that is so true. And I just want to encourage our listeners there, you do have to do the hard work. That's why we call it work. Even though when on the other side is bliss, and you can see from how we're talking about this, it's fun and light and joyful and exciting and interesting. However, to get there, you do have to go. I always call it a tunnel. You have to go through the tunnel. There's no
Mhm,
other way. But
mhm.
the light is at the end of the tunnel. And, all the stuff we're talking about, the new world, the new you is at the
On the
other
other side
end
of
of the
that.
tunnel.
Yeah, I really love that you also brought up like that it's fun because I think that that was another big trap along my journey as I started taking it all way too seriously and I really started to become aware of my like shame patterns. So like when working with shadows, kind of like when these things arise and you just kind of start to beat yourself up over it and you're like, here I am, repeating the same mistake and being triggered by the same thing and not quitting that bad habit and like on and on and on. It's like I realized that like, a lot of us again are conditioned to be better through shame. And and so and again, I think that's another trap that ends up distracting us from the real journey. The real journey is fun, honestly, it is because it's about opening your heart and it's about like with shame. My favorite thing is like I used to take things really seriously and now I kind of just like like I'm more lighthearted and fun about it and also like just like jokingly kind of laughing at my own mistakes instead of making it something that means something about who I am as a person. It's more just like silly human, making
Yeah.
silly human mistakes.
Oh my gosh. I say silly human all the time. In one of my meditations, it was a really deep meditation, and I was doing a lot of work and coming out on the other side. And like I think what brought me out is I felt God say to me, silly human.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be that hard. Like you can sit there and be in misery, or you can choose joy and
Yeah.
laughter, you know?
Yes. Yes. I know. And I feel like that's one of those things that we could say to other people, and it just never really clicks for us until we go through it ourselves, until
Yeah.
we just kind of realize that one day, I think that we're like, what has shaming done for me? What has all this seriousness done for me? Like, it hasn't. Like, I'm not making progress towards my goals. So, again, let's try something different.
Yeah, totally. Oh my gosh, this has been such a fun conversation, Erica. If somebody wants to reach out to you and work with you or learn from you, how do they find you?
Yeah, thank you for asking. So I am on Facebook. I have my business profile is Erika Lane, and that's the same on Instagram. So I think it's at Erika Lane 333. And then you can also find me on my website. My website is www.erikalane333.com.
And that's
And
Erica with a K.
yes, Erica with a K, Lane as Layne. And I think that's it.
So I have two questions that I ask all of my guests. And the first one is, what is one book that you would recommend everybody to read?
Ooh, ooh. Uh Well, I want to say the Gene Keys.
I was
I mean,
gonna say.
we talked about that, but also like if anybody's listening and you really do want to decondition from any kind of like feminine related stuff, there's this book called Pussy, a Reclamation. Ooh, that book changed my life a lot as well. So I love that one.
That sounds like a feather ruffler, you know.
Yeah, it is very provocative for
Yeah,
sure.
get some people going on their opinions about things. I love it. I'm gonna have to look that up. Okay, my final question is, what is one thing that you wish everyone in the world knew?
How freaking beautiful and unique and awesome you are.
Oh, I love that. Oh my gosh. I don't even have anything to say after that. Let's end on that note. Everyone, you are so amazing and beautiful and freaking awesome. And so is Erika. And I have
Thank
enjoyed this
you.
conversation so much. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me. I had so much fun. Thank you.
Absolutely.